All right. We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, coaches, parents, players. Coach Bo here. I am excited to bring this week's episode to all of you in the 80-20 baseball community. I'm not going to say much. We're just going to dive right into part one of our interview with coach and author JP NERBUN. The only thing I'm going to say before we dive into the interview is I hope all of you are having a wonderful holiday season. I hope your 2023 year is finishing strong. The next time we will be together is in 2024. We'll start off the year strong with the second part of JP's interview coming out next Tuesday. So I hope everything is going great for all of you. With that said, this interview is awesome. It turned out great. I'm pumped to bring it to you. Let's dive in. All right, 80-20 baseball community, I'm excited to be here with JP NERBUN, an author and more than that, a consultant, but just an expert in the area of team culture building, working with parents, and we'll dive into all that today. I'm excited. JP is based out of Ireland. Right now, he's in New Orleans. He's traveling the country because he's an expert at something people want to know about. And he's an author of 3 books. In fact, one of them I'm on chapter 12 of, and I'm loving it. And it's called The Culture System. And anytime I hear system, it piques my interest because I like systems and processes. He's also the author of Calling Up. That came out in 2019. And The Culture System, as I mentioned there, came out 2022. And he has a new book out, which I think is a fantastic topic that is not talked about a lot. The Sports Parent Solution is the title of that book. And it just came out, if I'm not mistaken, November 20th. So it's hot off the press. JP, how you doing?
Good, man. I'm excited to be with you here this morning and talk about youth sports and talk about how we can make things better for our athletes.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here with the audience. And I know you reached out, and I've had people reach out to me and, say, hey, I think it would be a good fit on your podcast. I always like to do a background and to see if they are, right, a good fit for the audience. And then I started going through more and I go, yes, this is exactly what we need to get into, not necessarily because it's the only thing that our youth coaches need to get better at. And you're an expert in an area that is under discussed. The book that I'm reading right now, it's crazy how many really well-known people you've talked to personally over the years. Maybe you could just dive into a little bit about your backstory, tell the listeners what's led you to where you're at now.
Yeah, I've got into coaching myself, years and years ago. It was basketball coaching. It was at the youth level. And I was fortunate in my 15 years of coaching to have coached youth, little kids camps. That was my summer. I coached a lot of high school basketball, but I even did some pro level coaching internationally in Europe and in Ireland and Lithuania. And so I had a lot of experience in coaching, was really, really passionate about it, got a degree in physical education and sports science. I kind of changed up my degree once I started to fall in love with coaching. I'd played basketball myself at the University of South Carolina, but there was a moment along my coaching journey, almost 10 years into it, when I recognized my passion and my work ethic weren't enough at getting me the results that I wanted when it came to creating a really great experience for my athletes, helping to develop them as people, and also helping them to really buy into some certain cultural standards and ways of doing things that were going to improve team performance. At that point, kind of 10 years into my career, I was coaching high school basketball in Tennessee. And I took a step back and said, man, the experience my athletes are having and I'm having, it isn't what I desire it to be. The experience, the growth, I don't feel like I'm growing them as people. At the end of the day, we were performing at the level that we could have performed at because culturally the connections weren't there. The relationships weren't as strong as they needed to be. And then the behaviors weren't there when it came to how hard we work and our attitude. And so I had done a lot of things for a lot of years to try to address those things, leadership curriculums, getting a leadership coach, doing book studies with my team, a lot of different things. Every year I was like, all right, let's try this, let's try that. And what I ended up realizing was 2 big things that I had failed to address. The first thing is the system, right? The culture is a system. So you talk about those processes. the ways that we do things, the way we run our team meetings, the way we run, practices, games, the way we communicate, everything within that system, right, is getting us the results that it's designed to get. So we have to actually focus. If we really want to improve our culture, we have to get back to our current system of culture, and we have to address those processes and everything that we're doing with them to start to get the results that we want to get. And so that was one big thing I learned as I really started to study culture. That took me a few years to really learn that. I had started a podcast and started reading books all about culture. But that journey in learning about culture and the podcast and reading books really came from the other thing that I realized, which was the most important thing. I realized what was the biggest obstacle to a great culture was my own leadership. I ended up getting a mentor coach. I thought it was to help me to fix everybody else in my program, find all the problems within the team. And what I learned was that I was actually creating that barrier through my own example. I wanted players that modeled self-control, but I wasn't very in control myself. There was many other things too when it came to, it's very results oriented at times. I get very emotional to that. Wasn't investing and showing real care towards my players, even though I felt like I cared about them. So all this was really sparked by an inner journey for me to work on myself as a leader and as a coach and to become better.
I think most coaches get in and they're trying to win some games. They're not embarrass themselves on the scoreboard. And that's okay. That's normal. I went through that same, transformation myself. Early on, it was about wins and losses and stats and that sort of thing. And it's really shifted the same for me. And so coaches that are listening, all you coaches that are listening, it's okay that you got in and you were focused on winning games. That's normal and that's natural. But hey, it's never too late to switch to being more of a transformational than a transactional coach. So in your book, speaking of one thing that stood out was that you wanted to be more of a transformational coach. You went through this transformation of trying to be more of a transformational coach. In other words, helping your athletes be better people and long-term people. And I'm listening to your book this morning, and part of it was the book, The Culture System, and Bill Belichick came up, and I thought, you know what? Belichick's going to be remembered as a coach that won a bunch of titles, but I don't think his impact as a transformational coach, somebody who made a bunch of lives, a bunch of better people. And I don't know Coach Belichick personally. I'm just saying, having studied him and read books on him before, he may have 6 championships, but what's that exponential effect that he's having on all of his players? I don't know. I think we need to also look at what is a great coach. One of the things I tell my listeners is the winning percentage that matters is what percentage of players become better people at the end of the year or for the rest of their life because of the impact you had. Another one is what percentage of athletes, of your players on your team come back and want to come back next year and play again. With that said, JP, tell us, before we dive into some of these questions, how can the listeners connect with you? Where can they find your resources? If you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's tocculture.com. And it's got links to my books there if you want to check those out. It's also got links to online courses. I got a few online courses for coach education. One is called The Competitive Cauldron. It's something that's used in soccer teams, basketball teams, baseball teams, ice hockey teams, just to make things a little more competitive in practice. Another course on playing time, how to better address playing time challenges within the team, as well as a whole coaching culture certification that's just all about transformational coaching and transformational culture, a culture that elevates the performance of athletes as well as helps them grow as people. And it's, in my opinion, it's one of the most practical, useful, applicable coaching online courses that someone could go through so that you can get certified in that as well too. So that's on my website at tocculture.com. And I'm also a little bit on Twitter at JP NERBUN, NERBUN, and then Instagram is at TOCculture as well. And if you really got questions for me, you can send me a message to my email, jp@tocculture.com.
Awesome. So they can go to your website and they can follow you on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm going to just start calling it X in 2024. Once January 1st rolls around, we're Xing out Twitter and moving forward. So there's definitely some avenues to contact you, and just go on like I did. I just went on audible.com and bought your book. It took 30 seconds. I know Amazon has your 2 other books. So, hey, you can get the Kindle version on that. I'm not making any money from promoting JP stuff. I just know this stuff is great. So let's get into some of these questions, JP. We're really going to talk about team culture and also dealing with parents, working with parents. As coaches, one of the biggest obstacles is, and most coaches that have coached at least half a season know one of the biggest obstacles is getting that cohesiveness with parents, getting parents as allies, as you like to say. So let's start with the team culture. What would you say are the two biggest drivers in creating a great team culture?
Yeah, you need to create, one is space for relationships and connections to form. And secondly, you need to work to make sure the standard is clear. And the more we can involve the players in the co-creation of those standards, the more likely they're going to be able to buy into those standards as well. So that creating that space is so important, though, coming back to that first thing, for just people to connect, right? And I think so often in a youth sports thing, it's very challenging at times because the parents come, they drop them off, you coach your practice, and then you leave right after. It's just trying to find space, whether it's on the weekend when you guys got games or a little bit of time in your practice, to allow young people to connect, whatever it's under eights or it's, high school. You want to create space there to connect in a meaningful way. And one of the most powerful ways that we do that was through the use of questions, getting players to answer questions about themselves, share their own stories, their own histories, their own dots, their own perspectives on things, just getting them to be able to open up and be people with each other and just be a little vulnerable. And that's a big component of it. And the other aspect is that standard piece. You probably got to take time at the beginning of your year to sit down and communicate those standards to the players. I often talk about non-negotiables for coaches, three really clear, specific standards that are really important for you as a coach. Outside of that, I typically work with the team to say, hey, what do we want to achieve here? What do we want the experience to be like? Okay, so what are the standards we need to have as a team to be able to create that experience for each other to achieve what we want to achieve? And that can be done, a little pizza party after practice or something like that. I've done that at the youth level, as well as I travel around and I do workshops with college teams, and we do something similar to that as well through some kind of like a preseason retreat. I also help to establish standards individually. Certain individuals struggle with certain things. So it's just sitting down with them and saying, what are your goals as an individual and where do you need to grow? And, what are some things you're really committed to working on this season? So you kind of set individual standards with different athletes as well, too. You might have only one or two athletes that really, struggle to listen during practice. And so it's like, well, do we need to have a big team meeting about that? Well, then sometimes it's just a conversation to really kind of set some individual standards with those two people. So that's kind of the big two things is make sure the standard is clear, as well as also creating space for connections and relationships to form.
Awesome. In your book, you talked about the 3 non-negotiables or having non-negotiables, but you also specifically mentioned not having too many. And I couldn't agree more. And this is very important. Once you're out in the trenches, once you're in there working, if you're a new coach and you're listening to this, you got to trust us on this. You're going to go out there and you're going to want to have 15 non-negotiables, 10, 20, 30 non-negotiables. And I think what JP's saying is excellent and what I've been talking about for a few years now. It's not the enforcement, it's the follow through on those. And I think opening up the conversation, what you said, opening up the conversation and having a two-way dialogue. So in fact, this morning when I was listening to your book, you were talking about 2 examples of a conversation with coaches, and maybe you could dive in a little bit on this. The lecturing coach versus the coach that has a discussion. That's a skill, but it's something we all can do. Maybe you could hit on that a little bit. What's the difference between a coach that's a lecturer versus maybe some tips to be more of a discussion, open-ended coach?
Yeah, I think it's important to note the similarity between these two coaches, the lecturing coach and the coach that has more of a conversation with that athlete. Both have really well-intentioned. Both want that athlete to grow and to get better. And so I think that's the thing that's similar about those two different coaches. And we can all be both of those coaches, right? I think the thing that I started to realize was I did a lot of lecturing. And if I had a conversation with an athlete after practice, I did probably 75 to 90% of the talking. And then I would be frustrated and I would say to myself, I'd say to my staff, I'd say to other people, like, I've told him a million times, I don't know what else to say. I've told him this, I told him that, he just doesn't want to listen. And if you feel like you've done that as a coach, it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to figure out a better way to communicate. And so a lot of the stuff that I do and communicate in the book there is based upon 2 kind of just different practices. One is the practice of motivational interviewing, which is a thing that's in therapy. It's a thing that's in, addiction treatment. It's in schools today, but it's a style conversation where we're evoking change, right? We're empowering others to change through the questions we ask. And also in conjunction with that, I'm a certified coach through Georgetown University, an ICF certified coach, executive leadership coach. And what I learned in there and through my training there was the power of questions and active listening. And so if you're a good coaching and leadership coaching isn't about coming and getting expert advice, it's about asking great questions to help people to, become more aware, to take more ownership of their behavior. And that's what really change comes about, right? We only change when we have awareness that we have an issue, and then we take ownership. But so often if we come with a lecture, what happens? There's a psychological thing called reactance that comes up for all of us, right? My wife tells me, you need to start doing this. There's an initial psychological reaction. I'm getting better at hiding that reaction, but like that initial reaction of like, yeah, but here's all the reasons that I don't need to change or I don't want to change. And so that's the natural reaction for our athletes. So we tell them they need to change something. But if we ask questions like, hey, what are your goals for the season? Or I'm noticing you're really struggling with this. What do you think about that? We get them to become aware of their goals or the results that they're currently getting, right? They're frustrated with their playing time. They're frustrated with their play, whatever it be. It's like, okay, I have awareness of the results that they want or the results that they're currently getting that are frustrated with. And you're trying to also bring back to awareness of what they're currently doing, how they're showing up, their work ethic, their attitude, and how that might be leading to those results. So I always talk about this closing the gap. I want to help people see where they want to go, but I also want to help them see where they currently are and what they're currently doing to keep them where they're at. And then to help them to identify what they need to do to close the gap from where they are to where they want to be. And so by doing that, I'm just asking a lot of questions. I'm reflecting back what I'm hearing from them. And occasionally I'm offering my perspective and I'm sharing my observations and my assessments, but I'm really only doing that mostly when there's permissions granted. And the athletes will grant you permissions as you start to have them talking more.
This message right here is absolute gold for parenting as well. So what I love about this podcast, JP, is these topics. These aren't just things we can use with our teams. These are things we can use in our companies. Almost all the listeners of this podcast are youth coaches and they have day jobs, so they own their own business or things. All of this stuff is applicable there. Like you can use it in 3 different places, which is awesome. And it doesn't just help you be a better coach. It'll help you in all those areas and definitely parenting. So what I'm hearing is, and let me know if I'm hearing this right, you have these conversations. It gets the athlete, the player to start reflecting and reflect, almost like you're promoting self-reflection. And this is interesting because a lot of people know about the strategy of getting the people we're serving. If we're a leader, getting those people that are serving us or that we're serving to believe or to feel like the idea was their idea, right? Instead of lecturing them, right? You're trying to get them to almost feel like it was their idea or it was their plan that they put together. You're just kind of guiding it. You're guiding them. It's like you're getting them to first self-reflect. So you're motivating them to self-reflect, and then you're also guiding them to come up with the decision or make the decision on their own. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, and it's something that we learn in leadership coaching, right? And is that you're the coach, you're the expert on your life. I'm not the expert on your life. So often when I'm working with a leader, a coach, or an executive, it is, I get what you want to get, the results that you want, but what's getting in the way for you? Like most people want to work harder. Most people want to have better attitudes. Most people want to be healthier. Like they want to make changes in their life. Like we're coming up on January 1, and there's a lot of people are going to sit around and go, I want to make these changes in my life. They don't need necessarily more information or more expert advice. There's plenty of books out there. What we need is sometimes just to be able to take the perspective of what's getting in the way for me. And so that's what we're doing as a coach. We got to do a better job of as coaches is just helping them to figure out, okay, what is getting in the way for you to make these changes? Because no player wants to be a jerk. No player wants to be lazy or anything like that. And so that's our role in these conversations more often than not.
Getting past the surface and getting to the why, there's the strategy of using the 5 whys. Like you ask, well, why is this going on? And then the player will give you an answer. Oh, because of this. I wasn't getting sleep. Oh, why is that? Because of this. Well, why is that? I don't know how accurate the 5 whys lead you to the root problem, but I think that's part of it. And I think of the curiosity. I think coaches need to be more curious, right? Some more curiosity. And I think a lot of us are familiar with like going down like a Wikipedia rabbit hole. Like you get on Wikipedia and you look up some famous person or, some movie star from the 50s, and then you go down or some sporting coach. I've looked up sports coaches before and I go down the rabbit hole, old coaches, Woody Hayes, John Wooden, and I go down that Wikipedia rabbit hole and then I click on some link of some player. And really that curiosity is there in us of others. We have to be, I think, as coaches, curious, and we should be curious about their story, their life story.
Yeah. Can I just share something on that too? I think there's a couple ways that we can be a little bit more curious. Obviously, one of those is the questions that we ask. And in those questions we ask, are we leading or are we curious? Do we have a naive mindset? A lot of times I might ask a leading question, and sometimes a really leading question is why? Well, why'd you do that? Right? Like I'm not really that curious, right? But more curious might be like, hey, what reasons did you have? Or what kept you from showing up on time, right? Or what led to you making that decision? We really have to have the curious mindset and then less of a judgmental mindset. And so we have to sometimes say, hey, I've got this story that I'm telling myself as a coach. I've got these assessments that I'm making, but I need to park that for a second. And I just need to go, wait, what's a little powerful? It's like, wait, what's going on? Just what's going on for you? I notice your energy is a lot lower today than it was yesterday. Or you notice your attitudes, maybe there's been a shift in your attitudes since last practice. What's going on for you? So just that curiosity. The other thing is when we do share feedback, we can still be curious. I think this is one of the profound things I've learned in the last year is that I oftentimes think that for years it was like, oh, it's when I get feedback, that's what I'm learning. No, when we give feedback, it's like, hey, I'm noticing this when I'm watching you coach. I'm seeing these things. What do you notice about that? What do you think about that? What's true about that for you? Like I'm going in and I'm sharing what I'm observing, but I'm also open to the fact that you have a perspective, a life experience that's different from mine. And so I need to understand what's happening for you as a coach in that. It's the same with our players, right? You see something, give them feedback. I noticed this, but I'm also like open to how they see the situation, right? And if we do that, so often other people actually be a little bit more receptive and become a little more self-aware and a little less defensive when we come with that curiosity, whether it's through the feedback or through the question that we ask.
100%. The curiosity shows caring. It comes across as caring. I love how you're talking about open-ended questions. It's not just, why are you doing that? And you're saying, because we do that and we think, oh, we're asking questions, but you really, as coaches, as parents, and as leaders or teachers, we're trying to funnel them into our answer. We're trying to funnel them back into our lecture rather than really, truly open-ending it. It's almost an inverted funnel. And one thing I recommend that's helped me over the years, JP, you tell me what you think about this, is I'll never ask just one question. I always say, ask at least one follow-up question. And again, I know in your book, you talked about, hey, you don't want to be an interrogator. This shouldn't sound like it's an investigation and you're interrogating your kids. So of course, we don't want to overdo it. But I think when you're open-minded and truly curious and your tone and your presentation of it can really help that. I have this rule with myself is ask at least one follow-up. So, hey, how's everything going? Hey, how's the family? And then they'll say something. And then I always try to find one question out of that. And that's usually the question that really gets it going. And then get to that third question and really kind of show that true curiosity. Does that sound like am I onto something there or?
Yeah, I think that when you're having conversations, follow-up questions, it's something we actually teach our players a lot. We do a lot of activities like speed dating within teams that I work with. And one of the rules in the speed dating thing is there's a question that we give them to ask their partner, but then we say your job is to have a follow-up question and to explore, to learn more about that. I think one of the challenges is in a practice setting though, sometimes as coaches, we don't have a lot of time. We got 20 athletes. So how do I give feedback in a way that's effective and I'm still curious? Well, sometimes you need to pull them aside and say, hey, what's going on? And you need to help them to self-reflect. Other times the standard's clear and it's obvious and you just need to really help them to self-correct kind of quickly. And if they're not too emotionally dysregulated, then what you can do is step in and just share your observation. Hey, what I'm seeing is your effort today, your focus, it just seems to be off. What do you need right now to be able to raise your focus and your effort? And they might say, well, I need to do this, or I need to do that, or I need a quick break. I need a reset for a water break, whatever. Okay. And just throw them back into that. So sometimes a question, just one question, really pointed, helps them. I'm still curious, like, what do you need right now to move forward and to have the focus that we expect of you in practice, right? So we might not always as coaches have time for a 2-minute conversation. We just need to jump in and support and then move out of that situation.
One that really just stood out right there was share an observation. It's so clear to anybody who's coached at least one season, even half a season, it's hard to do these things and run an effective practice and work on skill development and get ready for the game. But sharing an observation, just saying, hey, I see that you're not, doing that, or hey, this is what I'm seeing. And then maybe a simple follow-up. Is there anything I can support you with? Is there anything I can help you with? And then that's it. Now you've just planted a seed of awareness. Really what we've done is now we've facilitated awareness, or at least a path to being more aware. And that's truly where we want our kids to have awareness. Unless they have awareness and presence, it's hard to solve a lot of these issues. So I love that. Yeah. So coaches, you're listening to this. parents, leaders, if you don't have a lot of time, but you see something, as long as it's not something like bullying or something that needs to be addressed or a safety concern, maybe just share, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Hey, I'm seeing this right now. Is there something I can support you with? And then you can move to the next player or the next part of the drill.
Yeah. And then the difference between like, it's an observation and a judgment, right? So a judgment's like, oh, you're being lazy, like it's you're being lazy today. There's a judgmental tone and a body language. And sometimes the wording can be very judgmental. An observation is more of just, hey, I'm noticing this. I'm seeing this. It's a little more factual, right? Like body language is a tough one. So, hey, my observation today or what I'm noticing is just a shift in your body language today. It seems to be a little bit negative to me right now. It's coming across as negative to me and potentially to others. So just try to be a little bit more on the observation rather a little bit less of our judgments and assessments.
What a great strategy and a great method right there. That's one I've never used before. This is what I'm observing. This is what I'm seeing instead of, hey, you are this way. It's not so definitive. Love that. All right. So how can youth coaches apply the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 principle to building an extraordinary team culture? We talked about in the last question was, you mentioned the two biggest needle movers that you believe coaches need to utilize to create a great team culture. When you think of the 80-20 rule, maybe just a list of things that would be in the 20% of things that can move 80% or get 80% of the results of a better team culture. What are our priorities with building an extraordinary team culture?
Yeah, I think something that would drive the culture so much, and if you follow college basketball, I've been fortunate. I worked with Dusty May, who coached Florida Atlantic University, which made it all the way to the Final Four last year, a mid-major. And they're doing phenomenal now. They're a nationally ranked team again. And of all the things that I talk about in my culture system, the thing that he probably really just focuses the majority of his effort on, he doesn't probably do a lot of the other stuff. He admittedly says that. He just does a lot of conversations with athletes. They have a staff and they're all just divided up and they're just constantly having one-on-ones with their athletes, and they're working on asking better questions, having hard conversations, telling them where they see them, sharing their observations. And so I think one of the biggest things you could do to drive the culture is just focus on better conversations. That's on the field, off the field, right? Whatever. The other big thing I would say, if I was just to add one more thing that would just have a huge impact, is just through the way that we discipline. Just how do we hold athletes accountable? So often we're relying on fear-based type discipline methods, or we're using the carrot. We're trying to constantly use praise to get them to do what we want them to do. And there's a place for both those things, but the more we use them, the more we create an extrinsically motivated environment where their motivation's coming from their fear of not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're doing it for our praise and for our affirmation. And I think we all want our players to want to please us. There's something good about that, or something not necessarily unhealthy about that. But if that is their sole purpose and why they're working hard, is just to make us happy as a coach, right? To make us proud, then I would be really disappointed, because I want them to work hard and have a good attitude, because that's who they want to be as a person and as a player. And that's because it's going to help them to achieve the things that they want to achieve. And it's going to help the team to have a great experience and be successful, right? I don't want them to work hard and have a good attitude because I told them to do it, or because they're just trying to make me proud. Like I say with my children, like I don't want my daughter to be kind to others because dad told her to be kind and she wants to make me proud. I want her to be kind because she wants to be a kind person. And so we have to really focus on the way that we're holding athletes accountable. And if we can just make some changes in the way we do that, this isn't doing more. This is just changing the way that we operate, has a profound impact.
Yeah, it's not taking a longer path. It's just taking a little different path. In fact, that path might be even shorter or a lot shorter to a successful team culture. It's probably going to be doing less work overall, especially when you deal with a team culture that's not great. In fact, I'm out here in Boise, as the listeners know, and they fired the first time they've ever fired a football coach mid-year. In fact, I think it's the first time their football coach at Boise has been fired or let go ever. I think all the others just left or retired. They went to another job or retired. And I don't know specifically, but I kind of gathered that it was, well, they're 500 and the expectation is for them to win more at Boise. But the other part was the coach didn't have the locker room. He didn't have the team. I was telling my old man this last night, and I picked him up from the airport to talk some football and Boise and other things. And I said, yeah, they fired the coach because he was 0 for 2. He wasn't winning. And it sounds like he didn't have the culture. And one of the kids, their best receiver, went into the transfer portal. like out of nowhere in the middle of the year. It's definitely something that's a big deal. And they just hired a new coach who doesn't have any experience at all as a head coach. He's younger than almost every listener here. And now he's going to be paid millions of dollars to lead a Division I college football program. And the number one thing they said is he's got the players on his side. He has the player buy-in. He's been there 7 years. So he's been with the team 7 years. I would say 90%, 80%, it sounds like he got the job because he has the players buy-in already and he can create a winning culture. Something I use with my kid that works really well is your strategy of, hey, did you see that, Dad? Did you see me do that, Dad? And I say, yeah, that's cool. I go, but you should do that because you like doing, like she'll do a project and immediately want my approval. And I'll say, hey, I appreciate you showing me. That's beautiful. Thank you. But, another thing that's important is that you enjoyed you enjoy it, that you found it to be fun. And I think that goes along with what you're saying that is so important, right? So you don't want to overpraise. You don't want to just add carrots and sticks. It's got to be more intrinsic.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways that really we can do that. So sometimes it's just, I'll talk about two real quick here. One's what we call natural consequences. So say you have a great practice and guys work hard, right? And they're giving it their best and really get after it. Like rather than bringing your team in and say, man, I'm so proud of you, great effort. It's just like, guys, bring them in close and get in there, nice tight circle and say, what do you guys think of practice today? Oh, it was great, coach. This, yeah. How does that feel to have gone out there and put it all on the line, given everything you had to it? How does that feel right now, right? Or even just to reflect on the natural consequences of giving everything you had to the game, even if you lose. How does it feel right now to have given everything you had at least, right? I would feel proud, right? I'm proud of that, right? So I'm helping use positive natural consequences to reinforce the behaviors that we want. And it's not about, you should say, hey, I'm so proud of you guys, right? So starting with that. And the opposite, bring them attention to their natural consequences. When their focus is off, when their effort is poor, stop practice and ditch to the drill. Bring them in. Guys, what do we think about how our effort right now and our focus? Not good, coach. How do you feel about that? Is this who you want to be? No, not at all, coach, right? Okay. Well, what do we got to do to change, right? So just bringing our attention to the natural consequences oftentimes is enough to get them to self-correct. The other thing that I really teach a lot is I use a lot of logical consequences. And this is a lot about based on the positive discipline approach through the behavioral psychologist, Dr. Jane Nelson, who's done a lot of parenting and education around more effective discipline methods that are backed up by psychology. And so rather than punishments, which is I'm doing it to you, like you're not working hard, I'm going to make you run. I'm going to flip that and I'm going to say, hey, we have these standards. We've all agreed to the standards, but we're also agreeing to the consequences. When you choose to not work hard, when you choose to have a bad attitude, you're going to lose the opportunity in that drill. So sometimes here we're actually saying when we have that moment of correction where we have encouragement or we observation, we're picking up the effort. If they don't correct their effort, say, hey, I'm going to ask you to step off. And as soon as you're ready to come back in, you let us know and you can hop back in the drill. Right? But you got to be ready to meet the standard. And that might happen a few times. You might say, hey, I just step off here. Take 10 minutes, go reset yourself, and we'll see you in a couple minutes here in the next drill, and you can get back after it, right? But you've lost an opportunity. Sometimes your team, your players may struggle as well, and you might do a few of those interventions, and then the progression becomes, hey, I think we've had enough today. I think we'll call it a day as a team, or hey, I think just that's enough for you today. You can't seem to get it together. But I'm moving away from that fear-based approach. I'm just coming in and saying, hey, you know the standard. You've agreed that if you don't meet the standard, you lose the opportunity, you lose the privilege. And what that teaches is gratitude. It fights entitlement, right? That sense of entitlement by players. It helps to teach that practice is a get to. It's not a got to. You get to come out here. You get to do this. You get to play the game you love. You get to work hard. You get to improve if you choose. And we're respecting the autonomy of the individual by emphasizing choice. Hey, you're choosing to not work hard. You're choosing to have a bad attitude. You're choosing to not be focused. So now you're choosing this consequence. I'm not doing it to you. It's you're doing it to yourself.
So you're bringing awareness to the players and accountability to the players. I love how you're driving and facilitating and creating an environment of awareness and accountability. For example, the players, I think one thing youth coaches could do along the lines that you're talking about here is have a simple little contract with your non-negotiables. Have them sign it. I believe at the youth level, they should sign it and the parents should sign it, especially the lower youth level. And I think the wording at the end, right before the signature, goes right along the lines of what you're talking about here. And I think it's very important. They are saying yes to it. It's not like we're forcing these rules upon you. And you could say something like, I so-and-so, agree upon these. These rules sound good. These expectations sound good to me. Something along those lines where they are giving their consent and you're not just forcing it. And so they feel like, hey, they've entered this deal together and they weren't forced into it.
We do a lot of those team contracts. Sometimes we have a lot of athletes to help co-create those standards as well, to add a few themselves that they want when it comes to how do we train here, how do we play here, those types of things. And I think the really important thing that coaches often leave out is just what are the consequences. It doesn't have to necessarily be for every standard, like this is exactly the penalty, right? If we fail to do what we've said we needed to do, then we will lose the opportunity, we will lose the privilege, and that will look different in every situation, but there's going to be a loss of opportunity and loss of privilege, right? There's also other times where we're just going to require you to fix it. We're going to require you to step in and make it right. So often, I had a situation with a team the other day where the players were disrespectful to some assistant coaches. And yeah, there's going to be a consequence where they need to, lose potentially some playing time or something like that they're losing that opportunity there. But it is also, they need to go make things right with those coaches. And so that's where we talk about restorative consequences as well. Coaches looking for that coach to repair trust and repair the rupture in that relationship. But just the more we can communicate a little bit of our philosophy in that, because it's different. And sometimes when we go to this different approach, it's actually way more respectful, but it's different. Sometimes parents are going, wait, why, what's he doing? Like some people are more comfortable with me yelling and screaming at their children or making them run than me asking them just to step off. And so we have to really kind of communicate that, to the athletes and the parents as well, like you said.
All right, that wraps up part 1 of our interview with coach and author JP NERBUN. Part 2 of the interview is just as good as part 1, and that will be coming out next week. Try to break these interviews up so the episodes are around that 30-minute mark. So it's consumable each week, week in and week out for all of you great coaches, parents, and players. Until next week, 80/20 baseball community, this has been Coach Bo. Take care of your health, your families, your close friends, and take the information that you learned, that you heard in the interview with Coach JP, and take it out to the field, take it out to your training environment. And until next week, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.